Good morning and welcome everybody to our Wednesday morning webinar on UIF. This webinar this morning is quite a topical subject, and regardless of whether you're an employee trying to claim or an employer trying to submit the right documents and make sure that the information that you're submitting is correct, from both sides it can be quite a difficult subject to broach. So today this webinar is presented by myself, Nikki, and then I have Danelle in the wings, who is our resident expert on specifically the claiming side of things of UIF, and helps a lot of people with some of the challenges that they face on a sort of daily basis. So there is a lot of information that we have to cover today. So I'll try and get through as much of it as I can in the hour that we have. But do feel free, if you do have any challenges, to email us and we can then chat with you afterwards if you have a specific query. So some of the things we're going to be talking about today is UIF, what it is, who has to pay it, how much and how often, what are declarations. Now, declarations are quite interesting because when everybody was trying to claim TERS in 2020, one of the biggest challenges that we found was that a lot of employers, they were doing only half of what was required. So they were submitting their EMP 201 to SARS on a monthly basis, but didn't even know that there was something called a declaration. And so when they tried to claim TERS for their employees, what actually happened was they found out that Department of Labour didn't even know or have any of the history, and so the TERS claims couldn't go through. So declarations are quite important and need to be done, and we'll go through that as well. Then we'll go through claiming. So when and how can people claim? When can you claim online? When do you have to go to the Labour Centre itself? And then some of the challenges that we've come across when claiming. Now, it is quite important that as an employer, very often challenges that are being faced by employees when they claim often stem from things that the employer has or hasn't done correctly on their side from a submission perspective. So as an employer, it's quite important that you understand what your obligations are and you ensure that it's done correctly, because you could come many years later in trying to deal with claims for employees that have worked for you, 5-6 years ago, and now you're being asked to provide records. Okay, so we're going to start off by going into, what is unemployment insurance? So it predominantly comes from two acts. So the first one is the Unemployment Insurance Act, which basically deals with the setup and the running of the fund itself. Where does the funding come from? The benefits. So how does that whole thing work? And that is the element that is dealt with specifically by Department of Labour. Then we have the Contributions Act. So now this deals with how much people are supposed to pay. So as an employer, what do you pay? And as an employee, what do you pay? What are the definitions of remuneration? And then also, what is a declaration and what does the employer need to do with regards to submitting that declaration? And this element is predominantly dealt with by SARS, although with the declarations, these declarations have a specific place that they need to go. Okay, then when we look at the contributions, now this is quite important. I'm not an expert in terms of remuneration and, that kind of thing. But if we look at contributions, if we look at the Act, contributions are based on remuneration as defined in the 4th schedule of the Income Tax Act. Okay, so when you're looking at what your 1% needs to be made up of, you need to look at your at how remuneration is defined in that specific element of the Income Tax Act. And it is important to note that people like independent contractors, so true independent contractors, not independent contractors that we just decide that employees are independent contractors, but true independent contractors, pensions, retrenchment pay, restraints of trade and commission are not included within the contributions. So that basically means when you're trying to calculate what your 1% is made of, those things up there are then excluded. So when we look at the contribution, 1% is what the employee needs to pay, and 1% is what the employer needs to pay, up to the upper earnings of whatever the threshold is. So with effect from 1st of June, that threshold increased to 17,712 Rand per month, which is, if we take it to 1%, is 177 Rand and 12 cents for the employee, and then the equivalent for the employer. So in essence, what that means, so just to be clear, is that regardless of whether you're earning, 50,000 Rand a month or you're earning 18,000 Rand, the maximum that you will ever pay once you've reached that threshold is 1% of that threshold, which in essence means that you could be earning 50,000 Rand a month, then you, for whatever reason, become retrenched or you're fired from your job, and now you want to go claim UIF. You are not going to be able to claim UIF on contributions for 50,000 Rand because you've never paid contributions for 50,000 Rand. You've only ever paid 1% of that maximum. So when you went to go claim, you would only ever get a portion of the 17,712 per month, even if you're currently earning 50,000 Rand, because you only ever pay to that maximum. Okay, so when we look at employees, so who are employees? Now, this again was a big thing last year with TERS, and a lot of foreigners have still not been paid TERS, and there's a number of different reasons for that. But what a lot of employees, or at least employers, don't seem to understand is that even foreigners, so any foreigners, whether you're legal or illegal, are required and are included in the definition of employees and are required to pay UIF, as well as anyone who works more than 24 hours a month. And since 2017, the Act changed and learners are now included in having to pay contributions for not employment equity, for UIF. So it is important that if you, for whatever reason, have someone who's a foreign national working in your business and they work for more than 24 hours a month, even if they do not have a work permit or a permit to work in your business, you are required to pay UIF for them. And then what they do exclude is sole props. Okay, so anybody who only has one working member, and any employee who at the end of their fixed term contract is required to be repatriated to their own country, they are not required to pay UIF. So it's quite important that as a business, you understand who is included and who is not included in unemployment insurance fund. It is also quite important, and a lot of this is going into workman's comp and IODs. What a lot of companies don't realize is that with workman's comp, the way that they will, so a lot of temporary people, for whatever reason, companies don't pay UIF, or we include foreigners, et cetera, and so what happens is people do and don't pay UIF for their employees based on their own beliefs or assumptions or whatever. The problem that comes in is that if you had, for example, a foreigner who was working in your business, they didn't have a work permit, and so you weren't paying UIF. Let's, for argument's sake, say they now have a really bad IOD and they need to be hospitalized or have whatever going on. And what you try and do is you try and claim IOD for them, as an example. Workman's compensation can go back to your UIF and now start seeing whether or not that person was included as an employee to justify whether or not they were included in your return of earnings. If they were not included, then workman's compensation can say that they were not included as an employee and can reject the claim. Now, this also includes, this is from a side note perspective, it also includes that when you're submitting your declaration for your employees, you must include non-contributors as well. And that includes people that work for less than 24 hours. Is when you include them on your declaration, again, that creates a safety for them, is that if they become injured on duty and there is a question as to whether or not they were your employee, this can be justified by the declaration in which you're submitting to Department of Labor that these people did work for you, but they were non-contributors for various reasons. And so you can say that they were included in your return of earnings and therefore are covered by workman's compensation, and then you're not bound by any sort of liability yourself. So it's quite important that when you're defining employees and who should be included, there's obviously a distinction between those that you need to pay UIF for and those that you don't. But it's quite important that when you submit the information to Department of Labour, is that you're submitting the correct information. All right, so just going back, employees include foreigners, legal and illegal ones, anyone who works more than 24 hours a month, and learners since 2017 are now required to be included. Okay, so if an employee, as I mentioned before, is a non-contributor, they would still need to be declared on UIF, so on the declaration, but as a non-contributor. So there is a particular code that you would need to put onto your declaration, and these are the reasons that you could specify why a person would be a non-contributor. So these reasons have specifically come about off the Department of Labour website. And it is important to note that in as much as they have legislation that changes very often, the changes to the forms only come years later. So you'll see there it says number 2, learners in terms of the Skills Development Act is a reason for non-contributor, but the legislation changed in 2017 stating that they should be included. So that would not be one that you would use. But these are the various reasons why the person would be a non-contributor. So for example, somebody who earns commission only is a non-contributor, no income paid for the payroll period. So if somebody went on maternity leave and they didn't earn income during that period, you would still include them. So you wouldn't terminate them off payroll. They would still be included on your declaration as a non-contributor. So these are the reasons, but again, I think the main thing is that it's important that you make sure that even if a person is not contributing to UIF, that you include them on your declaration. All right, so if we look at what is required to happen on a monthly basis, there's really 2 things. The second thing is what a lot of companies were not doing prior to 2020, and that then affected a lot of the TERS payments. So there's 2 elements. So employers must submit to SARS before the 7th working day of each month an EMP 201. Okay, so that is assuming that the person is registered with SARS. If there are no employees that qualify for PAYE, then they will do this directly to Department of Labour. Then we need to do a declaration. So on a monthly basis, employers need to submit the names, ID numbers, and monthly remuneration of each of its employees and any changes during the previous month. Okay, this must be done by the 7th working day. This is called a declaration. Now, this declaration, I think it is on the next slide. Now, this declaration, and this is where it comes important, builds a history for Nikki as an example. So Nikki will have a history. So assuming all of my employers going back through the years, when I first started working, it will record that I worked at XYZ place. This is what I contributed. So my contributions were 1% of, let's say, 100 Rand. Then as I moved and I slowly started going up and up, I then moved from XYZ to ABC and then from ABC to DEF. And so what it does is it builds up a history of my employment through the years that I've worked. What then happens is I now need to get to a point that I need to claim, remembering that when you claim, or at least when you contribute, for every 6 days, I think it is, that you work, you generate as an employee a credit. And eventually you get to the point where you have all your credits, or maybe you have half or whatever the story is, and I now go to claim. They then have a look at what I have in my UIF piggy bank in terms of credits, and that then determines whether or not I can claim for whatever benefit it is that I want to claim. If we don't submit the declarations, what happens is that then affects my history file with Department of Labour. And what happens is they'll go to the system. So yes, SARS, or they'll have a record if it is Department of Labour, if you're not registered with SARS, they will have a record that HR Talk, as an example, has paid, for argument's sake, say 1,000 Rand towards UIF. But they have no idea, because there's no history file, where that 1,000 Rand is made up. So they don't know that there's, 5 Rand for Nikki, 6 Rand for Candace, and so forth. So they just have an amount of money. This declaration assists in building up that history and also allocating where all of those credits and where that money needs to go. And this lack of history, so it could even be that you're doing your declarations really well, but 3 years ago you didn't do it. That will create a problem for any employee that wishes to claim for maternity, illness benefits, or just general unemployment. And what will then happen is Department of Labour will then contact you to say, Nikki wants to claim, but there's a big gap in her employment history. You need to give us that information. And that sometimes can go back many years. So it's quite important that we haven't just fixed what has happened recently, but for the duration of a person's employment, that your declarations are up to date. Okay. When we look at the claiming, and what our experience tells us is then we look at the claiming for employees. Generally, they will go back for the past 4 years. But I know with the compliance certificates, as an example, which is separate, they will go back many years. Okay, so that's talking about the declarations. All right, moving on to claiming. When an employee can claim, so employees can only claim when their employment was terminated by no choice of their own, i.e. a dismissal, a retrenchment, an illness, a death. They can also claim for things like parental leave, maternity leave. So parental leave is that new leave that came about, I think it was at the beginning of 2020, which allowed the 10 days. So it took away your 3 days paid family responsibility leave, and it gave people 10 days for the birth of their child. That is 10 consecutive days, and that 10 days is unpaid. So, and that is not specific to male or female. So as a female, you could apply for it, or as a male, you could apply for it. You would then be able to claim for parental benefits for the time off from work that you didn't get paid. You obviously have maternity benefits that you can claim, short-term illness and reduced work time benefits. An employee cannot claim when they have elected to leave work. So that includes things like resignation, and elective retirement. Okay, so just to be clear, with elective retirement, so there's a lot of confusion with people. So there is an element on the UIF declaration, not the declaration, the UIF form, in which you can state there the reason for your termination was retirement. Now, you need to be very clear is that an employee, so Nikki gets to the age of, I don't know, let's say 50, and I've decided I'm done working, I have enough money, and I really want to just go and live in the Maldives. So I decide, so I elect to leave work, to not resign, to retire early. I have chosen to leave work. And so on that basis, Department of Labour says that you cannot claim for UIF if you've chosen to leave. So if I've chosen to leave my workplace, even if that is to retire, then I cannot claim UIF. So marking as the reason code for termination of retirement, that would not allow the person to claim. If, however, the person, there's an element in your contract or in your policy that says when any person gets to the age of 65, the contract will automatically terminate because that is our retirement age. That is a forced removal because the person doesn't have a choice. Their contract will automatically end when they get to 65, and they will, if they go into fixed term contract and all of those things, that's a separate issue. But Nikki now gets to 65. HR Talk says, terribly sorry, Nikki, as much as you like working here, you need to go. That is an end of contract. So on the form that the UR19, your reason for termination would not be retirement, because retirement means I've elected to retire. It would be an end of contract because the contract states that when I get to a certain age, my contract will end. And so it's quite important that as an employer, you clear on the reasons for that, because otherwise that person, if they didn't choose to retire, they were told to retire because of a policy. When they go to UIF, their claim will be rejected because UIF will see a retirement as an elective retirement and not a forced retirement, because a forced retirement is a forced end of contract. So I hope that makes sense for everybody. Okay, so these are the codes. I see that there's some questions that have come up. I will answer questions at the end. So any questions, just carry on posting them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer them at the end. Okay, so when we look at the reasons for, or at least the descriptions, so for your declarations, and then the reasons why. So here's some of the reasons. So one, a person is active, they deceased, retired. So again, retired in terms of Department of Labor, or at least our experience, retired means that you've electively chosen to retire, i.e. I have resigned from my job, and the reason I've resigned is because I wish to retire. So you cannot claim in that situation. Then you've got the code 4, which is dismissed. Code 5 is contract expired. So 4 and 5, obviously there's deceased, which is again, you've left employment not through your own choice, and therefore your beneficiaries will be able to claim your benefits on your, well, will be able to claim benefits. It is important that with that element there is a beneficiary form that needs to be signed by all your employees and kept on their file in the event that they die and their beneficiaries wish to go and claim UIF because the person has died. If you don't have that beneficiary form, it will be difficult for them to claim. Okay. Reason code 6 is resigned. They will not be able to claim. Reason code 7, as an employer, I don't know why anybody would put reason code 7 on the UI-19, because that basically means that you have made their person's life so difficult that they've had no option but to resign, and therefore they can claim UIF, but that is a CCMA claim. So I understand why they have it there, but putting that on the UI-19 basically means that you as the employer have done something wrong. Okay, then we got code 8, which is quite self-explanatory. Code 9 is maternity, and that doesn't mean termination of employment. It just means a temporary suspension and they're not being paid, so you still include them on the declaration, but the reason code for not contributing would be code 9, or illness leave. Then we got retrenched, transferred to another branch, absconded. Okay, so with absconding, I know I'm going to mention it further down. Absconding, if someone chooses to abscond, they cannot claim UIF. So it's quite important, well, at least it is for me, that if someone has chosen to leave and abscond, I don't particularly want them to have the ability to claim UIF because they've chosen to leave. And so you don't put dismissed, you would put absconded because they have chosen to leave. And then business closed, death of a domestic, so that's for domestic workers. Voluntary, just to be clear as well, domestic workers must also pay UIF, and so must the employers of domestic workers. Voluntary retrenchment package, reduced work time, commissioning parental leave. So commissioning parental leave is when you are adopting a child, and then obviously parental leave. It is quite important. So you'll notice on here that there is no code for a mutual separation. A mutual separation is where I, as the employee, have been approached by my employer to say, Nikki, things are not working out, we're possibly going to discipline you, or you can take this package. What do you choose? Now, in terms of Department of Labor, their view is, I have the right to go ahead to disciplinary action. I choose not to. I resign and I take some money to walk away. On that basis, as an employee that has chosen to take a package to walk away, I should not be entitled to claim UIF because I've elected to walk away. I could have elected to go to a disciplinary hearing. Yes, it would have been tough, but in that disciplinary hearing, I could have had my case heard. I could have gone through the process and I could have won. And if I didn't win, I would have been dismissed and then would have had the ability to claim UIF. A voluntary retrenchment package is slightly different. So although both are voluntary, with the voluntary retrenchment, there are documents that as the employer you need to complete. But what they're saying with the voluntary retrenchment is that someone was going to go. It may not necessarily have been Nikki, but we needed to retrench, let's for argument's sake, say 2 people. And so I then say, we're going to be going through this process. Does anyone want to put their hand up? And so Nikki and Danelle say, yes, we'll go. We'll take the voluntary retrenchment. So I'm basically taking the bullet for my co-workers who will now continue to have a job, but the reality is that 2 people were going to be gone. And so in that situation, you can then claim UIF because it was going to happen to someone. But there are documents that you as the employer need to, basically, you need to sign documents which say something along the lines of you were going through the retrenchment process anyway. Okay, so those are the codes. All right, so the following types of UIF benefits can be claimed through U-filing. Okay, so just to be clear, U-filing is the online portal, and you can only claim, so you go to www.ufiling, I don't remember what the rest of it is, but you can make claims online. So you can claim unemployment, maternity, adoption, and illness. The other ones, which is the death benefits, parental leave, and reduced work time, unfortunately, at this point in time, cannot be claimed through U-filing. As an employer, so in terms of your declarations, you also have the ability as the employer to submit the declarations online through a U-filing profile. Now, if you have a lot of employees, it can be quite difficult because there's abilities to upload things and that kind of thing, but the system doesn't often work very well. But there's a couple of ways in which to submit the monthly declaration, but one of those is through U-filing. So you have a profile, you upload it, hopefully it works, or you can capture it manually, but you can see the declaration history of all your employees at least through the years. And very often when there is an issue with somebody trying to claim for a benefit and there's a problem with the declarations, very often it can be easily fixed by doing it through U-filing. But that's in a situation when you're trying to fix 1 or 2, not when you have, 1,000 people or even 250 people, because the uploads don't work very well. Okay, so as I've already said, claims can be made online via U-filing or your nearest labour centre. So I've kind of said some of these things. You cannot claim if you resigned, been suspended, or absconded from work. So with the suspension, you cannot, because that's as a result. So that's not suspension if you're still being paid. Obviously, if you're being paid, you cannot claim. That I assume would be suspension from duty as a result of a punishment. You cannot claim in those situations, and then you can claim if the Commission for CCMA considers the resignation as a constructive dismissal. Again, so when we go back to those codes, very often I'll have employers that for some reason when a person leaves will say constructive dismissal. You need to be very wary of saying that right up front, because without understanding it, you put yourself in a position where you're saying that you've constructively dismissed someone. Okay, so to qualify for benefits, so this is quite important as a work seeker, at least to qualify for benefits, when you fill out the forms, one of the things that you have to do is register as a work seeker. Whether or not you want to be involved in the Department of Labour's work seeker program or you don't, you still need to say that you're a work seeker. By virtue of the fact that you say you're not a work seeker, Department of Labour says, well, then why should we give you benefits? Because we're not paying for you to just sit at home and wait for something good. You must apply for the benefits as soon as you become unemployed or within 6 months of termination of your employment. If you wait longer than 6 months, then you're no longer entitled to claim for the benefits. Okay, so the documents you need is an ID copy, certified, original ID or passport. So you must take both with you. So that's if you're visiting the Labour Centre, the UR19. Just to be clear with the UR19, so when a person leaves a company's employment, there are documents that you are required to give an employee. A UR19 is not a optional thing that you need to give your employees. Anybody who leaves, regardless of whether they are dismissed or they're resigned, it doesn't matter. You have a legal obligation to give employees their UR19. The salary schedule, so with the salary schedule, that basically depicts the last 4 years going back. Now, that's not something you necessarily need to give when somebody leaves, but when an employee is going to claim, they normally need to take that. going back 4 years, because very often the information, because declarations are not done, possibly Department of Labour hasn't updated correctly, and so their system doesn't have all the information, and so they ask for the salary schedule. So my suggestion is if someone leaves and you know they're possibly going to be claiming UIF, I would give them the salary schedule when they left anyway. All right. If there is a situation where there was a person who was claiming TERS last year, then the employer needs to write a letter. If you need a copy of the letter, please let us know, saying that I am deactivating you from TERS, i.e., you should no longer be on TERS because you cannot claim TERS and UIF. And then you need a 2.8 bank form, which is paid for and at least completed by the employee. So claims. Okay, so this is said a little tongue-in-cheek. Claims take approximately 35 days to get approved. That is assuming that everything works in the beginning. Once you have everything in the system and everything has been approved, the actual payment of the claims works quite nicely. The challenge very often, and we'll talk about it later, is that if there's a problem in the beginning, i.e. they don't have your history, they lose your documentation, you don't provide all the documentation, or there is a problem, this can take months and months to get resolved. But assuming all is well and assuming everything works correctly, once your claim has been approved, and it takes about 35 days, which it generally does, then on a monthly basis, when you submit your continuations, the money actually comes in and it works quite well. Okay. Denel deals with a lot of the claims. So one of the things that we found is that if you do the claim online, it does take a bit longer because you'll submit the information online and then you have to email, as far as I remember, you've got to email them your actual documentation. Now, what we're relying on there is that somebody is going to be checking the email and then they're going to be trying to link the online application with your documentation. And sometimes that takes a lot longer because you're asking people to link the two. The experience is that generally if you go down to the centre, as difficult as it is, the claim goes a lot quicker, and because they process it right there and then. So if you want your claim to go quicker, my suggestion is go down to the centre. All right, so as we've mentioned before, claims can be made both via e-filing or at the nearest centre. As an employed female contributor, you can apply for maternity benefits. So again, just to be clear, maternity benefits are only for females. Commissioning parents, parental leave, I'm trying to think of the other one. So it's commissioning and parental leave. That is not specific for females. That can be applied for both females or males. Obviously, if you're applying for, so if you have people are adopting a child as an example, only one parent would be able to claim for commissioning parent leave because it's a lot longer, and the other one would claim for parental leave. You cannot have both applying for both. To qualify for benefits, you must receive less than your normal wages while you're on maternity leave. So remembering here that if you're receiving your salary, you cannot claim UIF. If you receive 75% of your salary, Department of Labour will look at what you're short. So they'll say, oh, you're 25% short, and apply their calculation based on the 25%. So the likelihood that you're ever going to receive 100% is very slim, because they don't say, oh, Nikki was earning, for argument's sake, say 5,000 Rand. She's now earning 2,500 Rand. Here we go. Have another 2.5. And, lucky for you, you're now getting 5,000 Rand. They will then say, oh, Nikki's actually getting 2,500 Rand from her company. So she is short 2,500 Rand. So we'll apply on the 2,500 Rand, and Nikki only gets 65% or 60% or whatever it is of the 2,500 Rand. So it's just important that everybody understands that. So once your claim is approved, you'll need to submit monthly continuations until you return to work. So basically what that is saying, actually, yes, I'm still on maternity leave, or yes, I'm still unemployed, but you do need to submit monthly continuations. So I'm not going to go through all of the documents, but in terms of maternity leave, people try and, put their claim in like a month or two before they have the baby to say, oh, I'd rather be prepared. One of the key aspects of claiming for maternity leave is the actual requirement to have had a baby. And so what they require before they even process your claim is the birth certificate. And very often, I know it's not listed on here, but there we go. It's UI 2.3, is they need a letter from your doctor to say that you've actually had the baby. So unfortunately, you cannot be pre-prepared, as many mothers like to be before they have babies, and submit your claim, because you need to have actually had the baby in order to claim for maternity leave. All right, so then we've got adoption leave. So if you've legally adopted a child younger than 2 years, so it is clear you cannot adopt a 15-year-old and expect to claim for adoption leave, and you are a contributor of UIF, you can claim adoption benefits. To qualify for the benefits, you have to take leave from work or stop working to look after that child, and must be receiving less than your normal wages. So again, going back to the same principles, if you're receiving your salary, you cannot claim. Workers who adopt a baby must apply for the benefits at their nearest labour centre. So you cannot do this online, and you take the, you can do this one online, and you must take the documents with you. Okay, so there are different documents that you need to have with this. It's the, so the one thing is the certified copy of the adopted baby's birth certificate, as well as the adoption order. And then you can claim for the benefits, remembering that only one parent will be able to claim for the adoption leave. So it is quite important in the basic conditions. This is called commissioning parental leave. In UIF, it is called adoption leave. So if you refer to the basic conditions, it will tell you how long the person with commissioning parents can take off. And you will be able to see, the same as with maternity leave, there is an element within the basic conditions that says that if you lose the baby within, I think it's the last trimester, you do get more time. It used to be 6 weeks, it's now longer. You get more time off work if you have lost the baby within the last trimester. So it's important that your policy in terms of leave given off equates to, so it is updated. There are Department of Labour audits that are going around where they're asking for your updated policy or want to see it in your contract of employment, which includes parental leave and commissioning parent leave. So if that hasn't been updated, please send us an email and we will assist you with that. Okay, so then we've got our illness benefits, which again are slightly different. So you must be receiving less of your wages. So this is generally if you now moved on to unpaid leave, so you don't have any sick leave left. So if your sick leave has been extended, so you would need to do monthly continuations. We'll go through the documents now. But if your sick leave continues, you would then do continuations. You would submit a new 2.7, and you would continue to do that until such time as you are no longer ill. So these are the things that need to be completed. Slightly different again. So just remember the whole TERS thing. If you were claiming for TERS, they are going to ask you for the letter from your employer saying you've been deactivated. But over here, there's a medical certificate and a medical report from your doctor. And then now, obviously, as an employer, there's only limited things that you need to be getting involved here. So the main thing is the salary schedule and the 2.7, and then point number 7. But these are the things, if you're going to claim for illness benefits, you would then, now remembering somebody can claim for illness benefits while still being employed, they would go onto the declaration as a non-contributor, because they're not getting paid. And these are the documents that you as the employer would then give to them so that they claim for benefits. Okay. All right, and then there's the dependents benefit or the death benefit. So this is obviously when somebody has died and they've been contributing for years and years and years. So you can claim as a dependent from UIF if you're a spouse, life partner, guardian, or child of the deceased contributor. Now, many people don't know about this benefit. You need to apply within 6 months of the death. and dependent children must be under the age of 21. So unfortunately, you cannot claim if you're 45. And then dependents must apply for benefits at the nearest labour centre. Now, remembering what I said before, it is important that you have a beneficiary form. So what I would suggest, if you don't have the form, is there is a UIF beneficiary form that you get all of your employees to complete to say who are the beneficiaries that they are saying can claim for their benefits. That then gets kept on the employee's file, and then should something happen, should the beneficiary come, they can take that beneficiary form and they can then go down because the form is signed by the employee themselves. So these are the documents. So depending on if you're a life partner or depending on traditional marriages, these are the things that you would need to take with in order to go and claim for death benefits. But as an employer, the main thing is to have that beneficiary form, which you then keep. So much the same as you would do with Provident and or any other benefits that you have on a workplace, you would keep a beneficiary form on file. It is recommended that at the same time when you do any of the other beneficiary forms, or if you don't have other things, you would on a monthly basis, not on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, you will then ask them, so in January, to update it or have a look at it and update it. Then we have parental leave. So this one, a lot of people get very confused. So in 2018, 2017, 2016, there was a lot of a call for fathers, specifically fathers, to get more than 3 days leave for when their child was born. The legislation was changed. Everybody was really happy because now fathers had 10 days of leave. All the media reported 10 days leave, but didn't specifically mention that it was 10 days unpaid leave. So that's not really a problem, but a lot of specifically fathers want to now, when they take their when they have their children, is to take 10 days paid leave. The legislation says you get 10 consecutive days, which includes weekends, of unpaid leave to take when your child is born. That replaces the 3 days of paid family responsibility leave that used to be in the legislation. So family responsibility leave now only includes if, so there's obviously the, death of certain people, but if your child is sick or if your child dies, it no longer includes 3 days paid family responsibility leave if your child is born. These are the documents that you would need to take. You would go down to the centre and you would then be able to claim. Again, you can only claim if you're not receiving your full salary. If you're receiving your full salary, then you can't claim. Okay. Just to mention with the, I've gone the wrong way. Just to mention with parental leave. Now, as men, you could have numerous children a year. As a female, you kind of possibly limited to maybe 2. So the benefits that you would claim, if you're claiming parental benefits as a father and you're having numerous children, remembering the benefits are not unlimited. They would be based on the number of credits that you have throughout the years, and eventually they would be exhausted. Okay. All right, then we've got reduced work time. So this is when any person is on short time or reduced work time and receiving less than their full salary. Now, this was available before TERS. This has almost replaced TERS for some industries. So some industries can still claim TERS, but this is for people who have gone on short time or reduced work time. It could be as a result of COVID. It could be as a result of anything else. The only difference over here is that this specifically reduces your credits as an employee. So if you're on reduced work time for a year or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But if you don't have enough credits, eventually you won't have enough benefits. So TERS doesn't affect your credits. This does affect your credits. All right, and then TERS, I'm not going to go hugely into TERS, but this was the scheme that was brought about last year. I think everybody read about it. But now with TERS, there's specific criteria, specific industries in which people can claim. This was different to obviously UIF because it didn't affect the benefits And so there's only certain categories of employees who are covered to claim for TERS. Okay, what else? Okay, so I'm not going to go through the annexures. If you want more information on TERS, I want to go through some of the questions. If you want more information on TERS, please feel free to email us. And I'm not going to go through all of these because this specifically relates to TERS. But I'm going to go through some of the questions that you guys have posted. And let's go through. Oh, sorry. One thing that I did want to mention is the WABU, which is the scheme that is now being created specifically for businesses that were affected from the riots in KZN and Gauteng. So this is different to TERS. It's the same type of portal, so it looks the same. And this is specifically for businesses that were registered with UIF and their closure was directly linked to the damage or looting of its workplace. So it's not specific to people who just closed their businesses. This is specific to people who, have been negatively affected as a direct link to the damage or the looting. I do know that so some of my clients, Department of Labour has contacted them, they've put in a claim, and they actually come and do a site inspection to see. They want documentary proof of the case that's been opened. They need to ensure that there is an insurance claim. So this is specifically to help the employees that are now no longer able to work as a result of this. Okay, payments are made directly into the worker's bank account. Okay, unless the minister or delegated authority allows them to be made to the employer. The relief is paid at a flat rate of $3,500. It is delinked from normal benefits. I'm not going to go through that. Okay, then we've got some of the challenges. So some of the challenges that we have is registering the UIF profiles and verification issues. So with you filing, if you have, so a lot of clients that we have, you got an accountant, I don't know, whoever who, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago registered a U-filing profile. They used their email address and then never shared that with anybody. That email address doesn't exist anymore. And so when you try and say forgot password, it goes to somebody because we don't know who it was and we don't know where it's going. And so we are unable to log in. Trying to get that changed is quite difficult. And so, you have to go through verification and a number of things, and that's quite a difficult process. There's also random system errors, as I mentioned before, on due filing. So trying to upload the spreadsheet. So if you're trying to do a mass upload, there's random errors. You could go in looking at, for example, the declarations for an employee today. There will be issues. Tomorrow there won't. The next day there may be issues again. The foreign national issues. So with foreign nationals, especially with TERS last year, there was a big problem, because they weren't registered on the database. Documentation is an issue. So especially when you're trying to do a claim for UIF, the documentation and getting that information is quite difficult. Getting UIF to receive that information can be quite difficult, which is why we say if you're going to claim, you need to go, or at least it's suggested that you go down to the centre. I have spoken about the declarations already. I think the key thing as an employer is making sure that that's done correctly. Remembering that just submitting the declaration doesn't mean that they've received it. You need to make sure that it's been received without errors, and if there are errors, to fix those errors. And then finally, with TERS is the bank verification issue, which a lot of people have been having since last year. Okay, I have included at the bottom some of the numbers if you want to phone Department of Labour directly. And I'm going to check some of the questions and hopefully you can answer. All right, so Janine said, if a business offers early retirement, how do you reflect that on the UIF? So if you have a policy that says, for argument's sake, say our retirement age is 65, but we allow for retirement from the age of 62 as an example, then you would be able to put end of contract because your policy allows for an early retirement. So it just would depend. Sometimes you have within a retrenchment process that a person is given the option of early retirement. That is part of a retrenchment process. So in that space, they're taking sort of the bullet for other people. So that would be not a voluntary sort of removal, that would be a forced removal. And so in that space, I would put an end of contract. Okay. Beneficiary form. Oh, I don't know what number it is, Janine. You'll need to just send us an email. You can email us on hra@hrtalk.co.za. I'm not sure off the top of my head what number it is. So in terms of submitting the claim, so for normal UIF benefits, you can assist them with loading, so creating their U-filing profile and loading the claim on their behalf on the profile. But if there is any questions, if they need to phone Department of Labour, if they've got to go down there, they have to do it in person. But you can most certainly help them in collecting the documents, making sure that they're right and that kind of thing. And then if they do want to do it online, and if they can do it online, as assisting. You unfortunately, not like TERS, where we could submit the documentation, you can't do any of the other stuff on their behalf. So no, it's not like TERS where you can do it on their behalf. Jackie, do you want to ask questions online? I mean, do you want to ask your questions verbally? Oh, there we go. I've got your questions there. Okay, so let me go to Tundi. Yes, so if a person is receiving 80% of her salary whilst on maternity leave, the company will still need to issue out the UR19. Okay, so you will still issue UR19 because on the UR19, you will state there what the normal remuneration is. There's also the salary schedule, which will specify what they normally get and what they're getting now, but the code that you will specify is maternity leave. But the UR19 is quite important because that's what Department of Labour uses. All right, Jackie, okay, so case numbers given for retirement, retrenchment and maternity benefits have been given. They've been going on for 9 months, yeah. Okay. All right, so Jackie, can I suggest that you give us a call and then we can try and help you through that. So there's a lot of things that there could be issues. So if you give us a call, specifically try and speak to Danelle. She will be the best person to try and assist you if we can assist you. There's just something in a chat. Okay, where can I get the UIF benefits form to complete? So in terms of, you can either email us and we can assist you, or you go onto the Department of Labour website and you can download all of the documentation from there. Kim, all right, many companies are having difficulties getting the compliance certificates. How do you get this? What is the process? Kim, so I'm still busy going through the process myself and learning what needs to happen. HR Talk is testing a number of different things to try and assist clients to get this. What we are finding with the compliance certificates is very often some of the information, I mean, we're talking going years back, is problematic. So can I suggest, sorry, just if you can email me and then we can discuss offline, because again, it depends on what the problem is, and then I can take you through the process. And then maybe one day we can have a webinar on how to get your UIF compliance certificate once we have all the answers. Okay, so I think that's all the questions for now. I am 7 minutes early. I thought I was going to be late. But I think those are all the questions. Guys, if you do have any further questions on UIF, if you're struggling, please feel free to email us on hra@hrtalk.co.za. And we encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. We have many webinars that we've posted in the past that you can subscribe to, and you may miss a webinar in the future. It will come up on your YouTube channel, or you can go onto our website and subscribe there. And, you know, if anything comes up, if you do miss a webinar, you will be able to view it later. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this webinar and that you found it useful. If you have any challenges, please feel free to contact us. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful day.